So look, it's really, really great to be here on your 10th anniversary. And I think I was reflecting on it this morning on the train, thinking about, well, what can I say about being 10? And 10's a big age. It's good to be there. But actually, it's really about greatness. And sometimes you achieve greatness. Sometimes it's thrust upon you. Actually, you think about Shakespeare, what Shakespeare said. He said, be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. But actually, you've probably achieved that over the last 10 years. And actually, you've done that from a place of social media as well. So, and the power of social media, it does focus that, and it forces change. So great that you've sort of been there and then you've come to this point. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HS2 today, and HS2 is actually quite similar in that same regard. So HS2 wasn't born great. It is now definitely a great project. But actually at the time it started, there was a lot of debate about whether HS2 should go ahead. I don't know if you recall that. And over the years, we've actually had to lobby and go through various stages of political machination to try to get to the point where it's now a great project. So we're certainly in the same space as you in that we feel like we're on that path to achieving greatness. So today is a little bit about celebrating some of the success that we've had along with you and the use of our NEC contracts. And I'm going to take you through a little bit about what HS2 has done. But first, a video. Let's see if it works. Quite an inspiring video, I think. And it's really, when you look at a video like that, and I started with, it's about achieving greatness, you think about all the things that H2 is trying to achieve. it's not just building a railway, it's actually looking at legacy, it's looking at people, it's looking at really a massive construction job. And I feel immensely benefited and privileged to work for HS2 as their procurement supply chain director, and I've been involved with all of the procurement of all those contracts that are now delivering that amazing project. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about that project and also how NEC has helped with that and how we're using that contract form to get the very, very best out of the construction as well as the future. So here's some key benefits of why HS2. This is why HS2 was given the green light effectively. So we talk a lot about three key problems, and it's about better connectivity, more capacity, and cutting carbon. All those three things are really super important to H2, and the thing that's interesting is how we actually then put that into our contracts going forward. The capacity point is about demand for rail travel, and it's interesting because over the last couple of years, we mentioned already COVID and the way we work is now different. Actually, in the future, there will be a different way to work, that people will probably work more from home or remotely. But that doesn't mean that the rail system doesn't need to be upgraded. So capacity is super important, as well as connectivity. So connecting different parts of the country to one another is also part of the ambition for High Speed 2 more generally. And it's vital that that capacity is thinking about the whole of the rail network. So we think about the bit that we're building and connecting other parts of the UK with the classic rail line so that we get that greater connectivity. For those that didn't know, HS2 is an electric rolling stock platform. I say that because sometimes people don't know that. And actually, you have diesel locomotives for some of these trains. High-speed rail is always electric, and therefore the carbon efficiency of that over using diesel locomotives is actually hugely beneficial. And it's going to act as that catalyst for growth for the UK. So this is not only about London, it's also about the Midlands, it's also about the Northern powerhouse. So we'll do a lot more in how we connect those different parts of the organisations to those different parts of the country. I'm going to talk a little bit about the progress here, and there's some really good pictures here about how we're making that progress. So in HS2 language, we talk about two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. And phase 2 is split up into two sections, phase 2A and phase 2B. The phase 1 part of the route is the route that you just saw. That's the thing on the video, which is that section from Birmingham up to the Midlands, so down to London, so that section there. We've made really good progress on that with our main work civils. So over 90% of the enabling works are now complete. We've now got through that phase, and that's all the early work you're going to do before you actually do the main work civils, and all these things are done using the NEC form of contract. We've got over 340 active sites between London and Birmingham, and we've issued all the notices to acquire land as well. So we've got all the land and we're starting to build. But crucially, there's 4 major stations in this part of the route, which you saw again on the fly-through. So we've got Euston, Old Oak Common, Curzon Street, and Birmingham Interchange. And those are significant stations for connectivity as well as commuter transport. And these stations are now starting to be built out of the ground. Not only that, I mentioned rolling stock already, but we've got a whole rolling stock programme. We've just awarded the contract for rolling stock. That's a £2 billion worth of procurement for our supply chain for rolling stock manufacturers. And that is a huge investment for the UK, but also for the way in which this rail will operate in the future. So we've got about £21 billion worth of contracts in the supply chain already, and all these contracts from HS2 are NEC forms of contracts. They all flow down as NEC forms of contracts. They're all in the supply chain. They're all backed off in the same way. And we do quite a lot of work with our supply chain directly, not only the tier 1s, but also tiers 2 to 5, to how they're operating and also how they're getting benefit from that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. I suppose the thing that the press likes is the launch of the tunnel boring machines. And you'll see, I think the top right-hand picture there is one of the pictures in the tunnel boring machine going through the tunnel. Very, very exciting, these huge machines cutting into the ground to make these tunnels. And actually there's a few more here. what I would say about these pictures is just the scale of the construction is unbelievable. So you go to one of these sites and you just look up and it's like a 10-story building, and it's just a wall. And you go into the tunnel, you can see the size of the person in the tunnel there. These tunnels are huge. So and I think sometimes people don't quite understand actually the scale of the cuttings, the scale of the concrete, the scale of what we're moving is phenomenal. And that's probably why we're starting to move to be one of the greatest infrastructure projects, certainly in the UK, but maybe in Europe. So I've talked a bit about what we've done so far, but there's still a huge challenge ahead. And we've done a lot of work in phase one, and we're really pleased about how that's been enacted. And we've used lots of different types of forms of contract to get to that point as well. So we've used option E and option C, and a little bit of option A here and there. So we've used all types of forms to get to that point, and we're using the same sort of strategy to think about our next phase, which is phase 2A. In phase one, we've got about 140 miles of railway. You've seen that on the fly-through. And we've got a lot more of that to build still. So although we've done the early works and we're getting through the main works, we've still got the railway systems packages to put forward. So that's all the track slabs, all the way up to rail, and then the signalling and infrastructure that goes around that before you have an operational railway. We've also got about 32 miles of twin tunnel to go as well. So quite a lot of tunnelling still to do is probably what I would say in phase one. We were excavating about 130 million tonnes of earth. So, I mean, that's quite a huge amount of earth. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen what a tonne looks like, but 130 million looks like a lot, believe me. So I suppose what we're saying is that as we're going through this life cycle, we're probably operating these contracts in a way which is evolving as well. So we evolve with our supply chain in how they're going through these different phases. And I think that's super important because, a bit like you need to show that flexibility when you're actually moving through these different phases of the life cycle of construction. And I think that's one thing that NEC does give you, and that's one of the reasons why we're using NEC version 3. So I spoke a little bit about 2A, but 2A is the next major section. It's that connection between it's the Midlands and the Northern Powerhouse. So that's the super important part. It's actually quite a short section, but it's quite complicated because of the interchange and the way the rail works around Crewe. So 2A consists of about 17 viaducts and 65 bridges, 36 embankments and 26 cuttings. I had to read that, I couldn't remember it. But it does have a lot of bridges and a lot of construction involved with that. I said it's quite a short section, but actually it's still a huge undertaking, about £7 billion worth of work. So we've got roll ascent on this section, so that's the way it works. We have to go through hybrid bill and then roll ascent. And since then, we've been eagerly putting forward contracts for procurement in tender at the moment, and some are being tendered right now. So in this case, we're doing something slightly different, which is a design and delivery partner. And our design delivery partner is a partner which is going to be part of HS2 to help the initial design and then push out the delivery and manage delivery for our construction across phase 2A. Now that's, I think, quite innovative because I think one of the challenges with many design and build contracts is that how do you do design to a mature stage so that a contractor can actually then take it and use it. And that's always something that I think in all construction you have a challenge with. What we're trying to do with the design delivery partner is using a joint venture who has done some construction before and some delivery, give them the responsibility for delivery, but also give some responsibility for the scheme design before that goes to market and then tendered for the main civils works. We're trying to link that design to the delivery. And in my mind, this is probably the first time HS2's done it, and I don't think it's been done elsewhere in the same way before. So a really big step, we think, in how we're actually managing that design interface to the delivery interface. And it's going to be really interesting when we award that contract later this year to which partner it will be and how that then starts to progress. So hugely exciting contractually and from a a delivery perspective as well. So this is a 38-mile route enabling towns and cities in that area, and construction's already started, so it's underway in our early works already, and the main civils works is due to start in a couple of years after we go through the competitive process of tendering. Crucially, 6,500 jobs will be made in this area and up to the north. So that's going to really help the economic recovery from the pandemic, and that's partly why HS2 is the catalyst for growth. So Phase 2A is the first bit, that's a relatively short section, but Phase 2B is the point that goes all the way up to the north. And you'll see lots of this in the press at the moment because we're going through Hybrid Brill and then up to Royal Ascent. So this is a different phase of the project. So this is very much the strategy phase. So we're building on the work we've done in Phase 1 to then think about how we've developed the Phase 2 strategy. And we're actually at the moment looking at how we're developing the Phase 2B strategy. So the Phase 2B Western leg, as we call it, has been submitted to Hybrid Bill and to Parliament already. It was done in January this year, and we're going through that phase of agreement with Parliament at the moment. So we're at the very beginning of that journey, but it's a 52-mile route, so a long route, and includes the new high-speed rail at Manchester Airport and Manchester Piccadilly, and critical infrastructure for the Northern Powerhouse Rail. So that's that connectivity point. So this is really connecting different parts of the UK to Birmingham, then to London, and that's why the Hybrid Bill is going through. So here's a whole load of stuff you can see here around HS2 being more than just a railway, and I've talked a little bit about catalyst growth and capacity, but also there's a value for money point. So on the value for money point, this is where I guess this is the focus of my role in HS2. It's about how you get value for money from each of these strategies. How do you try to get the best from our supply chain? And I'm really pleased to say that actually NEC formal contracts is always well received by our supply chain for HS2. I was chatting to Glenn very quickly earlier about Z clauses, and at HS2 we try not to use too many Z clauses, but the ones we do hopefully are for the benefit of our supply chain or driving flexibility. But some of it will also be to help with the things that we're looking for around catalyst growth, skills and employment, apprentices, and maybe some of our sustainability and respects aspects. So these are all key functions of what we look and assess at HS2, as well as our health, safety and standards. So you're seeing on this page quite a lot of stuff here which is really crucial to the way HS2 delivers, and often we get some questions from the supply chain to why we need to include those things, and it's because HS2 is the catalyst for growth and we're trying to develop in a way which is going to be a benefit for the future, not just the construction phase of this project. So that is our vision and our vision for growth, and our vision for growth is then borne out through our contracts and through the way we strategize to take these things to market. And also it's borne out through then the suppliers then delivering that in our supply chain. So just to talk quickly about our supply chain, we've procured about £23 billion worth of work across the project so far, so a big number, but there's a lot more to go. That's supported 25,000 jobs in our supply chain and lots of apprentices as well, so we've got apprentices and jobs, and then new businesses are also being born from that. What HS2 does more directly, though, is that we look to our supply chain. So we don't just deal with our JVs and our tier ones. We actually engage directly with our supply chain. And the reason why we do that is because we want to understand why and how they're being delivering our projects. Sometimes in tier 4 of the project, they don't even know they're delivering for HS2, which is, I find bizarre. I mean, how can you not know that you're doing work for HS2? But actually, if you think about it, some of these services are remote to the project. So we help them understand, actually, there's HS2, this is a project, this is what we're trying to deliver. We also help them for fair payment terms and getting paid on time and looking at how we support them, quite frankly, through some of these difficult times like the war in Ukraine and the pandemic. The war in Ukraine actually has provided some really interesting and difficult things to deal with. So not only are we looking at sanctions for Russian oligarchs, but also looking at sort of shortage of steel supply and steel supply that we're using for sure because of the plate steel that we use for bridges and even some of the rebar that we use for construction. So those shortages have to be tackled, and they can't be tackled by just one SME. They need to be tackled by all the supply chain and with the help of HS2. So I very much see my job as helping the whole supply chain tackle and work collaboratively in that way. So we spend a lot of time supporting this initiative of jobs, apprentices, and our supply chain and our SMEs. And we think that's important because that's about UK growth and also how we're going to, as the UK, grow our supply chain and our suppliers in that supply chain for future infrastructure projects, which will help us in phase 2, but also the other UK infrastructure projects that are going on at the moment. So super interesting time. So just to give you a little bit more of the look ahead. So we've got Interchange Station. That's in the final stage. It's literally about to be awarded. It's a £370 million contract due this year. We've got the Phase 2A civils work. So they're the civils works which interface with that innovative DDP concept, which we're looking to award this year. And then we've got the rail systems, which are starting to be awarded back end of this year and into next year for Phase 1. So you can see there's massive packages of work to be delivered in the next, or from a procurement perspective, to be delivered in the next year or so, and then from a construction perspective, rolling off the back of that. So we're very much all systems go. Everyone that comes to see me and says hello says, you must have a very busy job. And I do have a busy job at the moment. It's very, very busy indeed, but actually really enjoyable and really challenging, which is why I work here. So I always put this one in because I like to just sort of say, tell your friends about HS2. So there's a bit about how you secure work at HS2, which many of you may not be interested, or may have sort of know people who might be interested. But basically, we look at different types of forms of contracts, and we also look at different types of ways of securing work. We very much make it as easy as possible. So for these major procurements of several £billion, and they go through very complicated tendering processes usually because they're complicated contracts. But also, we like to make it as simple as possible in our supply chain to obtain work. So we have various different forms of short form route for contract, but also purchase orders like you'd ordinarily see to allow that to happen. Excuse me. We also have the Cubitt 4 website, which is all our supply chain work is put on that Compete for opportunity list so that we can get new entrants into the market for the work that we do at HS2. So that one always goes in, I'm afraid. So you're going to get that one in. But I guess the main message here for me is that to get the great projects that we know that we are, we need to get the right behaviours and the right collaboration between our supply chain. And I think that's probably taken time. So back to where I started really, which was some are born great. I think HS2 wasn't born great. Even though it is a great project, it wasn't born great. And that's why there was a lot of debate about why HS2 should go ahead. Actually, I think we are achieving that greatness now. And that greatness has come about because we work collaboratively with our supply chain. We work in our supply chain. We try to unpick some of the issues that they're feeling around supply of these materials or maybe cost pressures. We try to understand about why these things are working. We do that in a way which is quite collaborative, but also then helps them contractually. And that's why one of the benefits of NEC and the way we can sort of flex those arrangements to try to help our supply chain deliver the very, very best. So it is about working collaboratively. It's working well, and that fundamental part of the NEC is about mutual trust and cooperation. And that's why I think it's worked so well so far. We've used that fundamental principle of the way the contract works in our supply chain. So, and the final thing I'd like to say is just about the value. So we've used that as a format, we've used that as the way forward, but also the values that we try to put into our supply chain all come through that contractual mechanism. And that's why I think we will continue to grow and will continue to achieve greatness. Thank you very much today.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Fantastic talk, and we've deliberately, now you might not like this bit, we deliberately left a good slug of time for questions. So is there a roving mic around? Oh, Christopher has the mic, and Nathan as well. So please take this opportunity. We've got 15 minutes to really sort of quiz Andrew on aspects of the biggest infrastructure projects in the country at the moment. So any questions for Andrew? Any questions to start us off?
John Broom, you said that design is being linked to construction for phase 2A as a delivery partner. Could you amplify on the details of how you're doing that, please?
Yeah, this one
should do.
Yeah. So, like I said, one of the challenges we find is that link between design and build, and you can produce a really mature design as a client-led design, and give that to the market. The challenge is that the market, the suppliers, we're going to have to then assess that to whether they want to do that in the same way. And that takes time and money, and they won't want to invest that through a tendering cycle. So on these mega designs and mega projects, it takes a long time, and that's the challenge. So what we're trying to do is bring a designer and contractor on board in a JV relationship as a design and delivery partner. We're incentivising that partner to produce the very best scheme design they can to incentivise the outturn cost of the project. And they'll be effectively managing that with HS2 as on client side for delivery of that, the delivery of the H2A scheme. So what the DDP is doing is that they're producing a scheme design which they then use to select their civils contractors underneath. And that's that interface between their design, being a contractor, and the civils contractor is the bit we're trying to join up and incentivising the whole package approach to design and then delivery in one entity, which is our DDP.
And how are you doing that? That's the detail I want.
The detail, I'll speak to you in the break.
Questions for Andrew? Two down here. Most I've seen you run, Chris.
There was the insolvency of Road Bridge and there is criticism. I've just wondered what you're doing about insolvency in the supply chain, given the pressures that are existing in the market at the moment, both with inflation but also sanctions.
Yeah, I mentioned that we're directly involved with our supply chain, and what we're doing is we've assessed the 2,500 suppliers in our supply chain to their criticality of work, the amount of work they've got and their capacity. We've also got the normal measures like Dun & Bradstreet to look at their, I guess, the liquidity and potential insolvency. We produce a report on a weekly basis to look at those top 20 on our list, but there's 2,500 that we're looking at, and we regularly cycle through that. And what we do is, on a weekly basis, we meet with our tier 1 contractors and say, here's some capacity issues with some of our supply chain. And they're not only, the interesting is, they're not, you can't do that on a tier 1 basis by contractor, because what we're really looking at is what work they've got across the project. Now, they may have work outside the project as well, but as far as our project goes, what's their capacity within the project? And actually, many of those contracts at tier 2 and tier 3 will appear all over the supply chain. So we're bringing that information forward to our tier 1s, and then we're proactively assessing whether those contractors need help or whether we need to redistribute some work. Excuse me. I've been fighting a cough all week. So in the case of Road Bridge, it's very, very sad that they went under and have gone into administration. They were assessed as part of our assessment criteria, and we already had plans in place to look at how we were going to mitigate some of that. There wasn't no step-in right with that particular contractor. So we didn't offer any financial help directly in that case. That's not to say that we wouldn't. It's just to say that in this case it wasn't applicable. But certainly what we're trying to do is keep that supply chain buoyant as possible, and that's why we're looking at interventions and also looking at how we distribute work and how we might make it a little bit more easy to get some of these materials that are difficult to select.
Thank you. Leslie and Hezron down the front here. Ladies first. Oh, someone ask it, for goodness sake.
Hello, I'm Leslie. So we've got a couple of phases going on, and I think delivering these really large, complex projects is really hard. So my question to you is, what from the earlier phases have you learned that you've applied in the procurement of your later phases?
Yeah, that's a great question, Leslie, thank you. So in phase one, we very much thought about this design and delivery interface. And what we try to do in phase one is to progress that as quickly as possible, the design that is. But recognising that the problem with that, because actually the contractors need to own that design. So in phase one, we had these mega packages. They were £1 billion upwards in construction. And the risk that the market were able to take at the time was different to the way the market is now working. So the first lesson learned is think about the suppliers and where they are economically before you then set the strategy to be the same. So in phase one, it was a different period of time. It was a different market. We had various things going on with Carillion later after that. And I think, you've got to be agile to the way the market changes. But the interface between design and construction was probably the first lesson learned. And that's why in phase 2A, we are looking at that interface very carefully. It's also why we're looking at the size of the packages. So in rail systems, they are circa £500 million, sort of at the top end, rather than this sort of £1 to £2 billion package. Again, it's about how you allocate risk and how the supply chain will take the risk, because we very much want a target C arrangement in some of these rail systems packages, which are more technical, and we wouldn't have necessarily done that in the £2 billion civils packages before. So we're changing our approach to be, I guess, let's say, more cost-centric with regards to target cost, and we're looking at our interfaces between design and delivery, is probably the answer, always with a backdrop and mindset of what's the actual market doing at the moment.
I think even the option C contracts, in my experience, when we're doing training in HS2, I call them option C-ish, because they're a lot closer to option E, but it's a really interesting model. So there's little or no pain, but there's incentives to maximise fee percentage. So it's kind of a hybrid between C and E. But again, it's an interesting model.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I've been lucky enough to work on HS2 myself, so a lot of it was looking forward really into phase 2, and I think picking up the question just asked about phase 1. But you're getting closer to the end of early enabling works. How has the closeout of some of your contracts been? What's the performance of your supply chain in that area? And have you had to alter any of your clauses going forward into the latter stages of the programme?
So I think in short the answer is yes to most of that. It's going well, but there are some changes that we have to administer. So and I think with every closeout of every contract, there's always going to be some fettling. And I think and that's probably where we are at the moment. And it's about that handover from the early works to the main works. And so I think we're still working some of that. Is probably what I'm saying, and we are in the stages of closing that out. But I think there's also it's also this thing about, is there any part of the contracts which needs to be retained or continue in some form? And I think, again, back to the earlier question about lessons learned, there's probably some lessons to be learned around how you do that and then how you then mobilise that for the next bit.
Question?
So?
I'm very interested to hear about you going down to tier 4 of the supply chain. Are you using a project bank account in HS2, and are you getting the project bank account as low as tier 4s?
We are using PBAs, yeah, and no, we're not getting as low as tier 4 always. So to give you the straight answer, so we're actively pushing PBAs in our tier 1s and then our tier 2s, and we're seeing the active use of it. I think there are some instances where they're not being used, and we're investigating that as we go through. And that's, again, will be something we build upon as we go through the supply chain. It's also about the supply chain being, I guess, more accepting of it themselves, I think, is the other point I'll say. So I think at Tier 4 and Tier 5 supply chain, are they geared and ready to use the PPA in the right format? So there's a bit of that too.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We've got time. There's there's a few more. So
just with the long nature of these projects and the uncertainty with inflation, how are you dealing with that from a budgeting and funding perspective?
Topical. I like it. So our funding comes from government, and so HMT and via the DFT. And the HMT are dealing with a pan-government view on what inflation might be. And the challenge is government machines move slower than private sector organisations, certainly private sector organisations that are spending money on a daily basis digging a massive hole in the ground. So actually what we're doing at the moment is we're covering that. So we recognise you've got to spend the money, you've got to continue. We can't hold the project back. The project timeliness is key. So two things that we are absolutely passionate about is delivery on time and delivery to cost. And what we're doing is effectively using the analysis that we're doing about our supply chain, some of the materials, how they've gone up, how they've increased in value, and producing a summary report back to HMT to say this is what the inflation is on the project at the moment. And what will happen is that in time, HMT will then opine on that and then provide a view to how the budgets need to be uplifted. And that's how effectively it works. So yeah, we're dealing with it, but we have to deal with it in a way of dealing with the projects and then dealing with government.
next question.
Hi. You touched the subject of Z clauses earlier, with a focus on health and safety and sustainability. Are you able to share lessons learned on what has worked well, what hasn't worked well with government agencies such as DEFRA working under the EA and GSA frameworks?
Sorry, I missed the middle. I couldn't quite hear.
The Z clauses you touched on earlier about sustainability and health and safety.
Yeah.
Are you able to share those lessons learned, what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, with government agencies such as DEFRA working under the Environment Agency frameworks?
So I don't know a huge amount about the DEFRA framework, I'll be honest. So I'm sure we could share something. I'm not able to share it right this very second. So let's work out how we can share that if we need to share that.
We got Mark from the Environment Agency talking the next segment, so we could pick up on that theme as well. Just on Z clauses, and Andrew's not paid me to say this next bit, but in training recently, it's the first time ever I found myself, and I counted by the mid-afternoon, I found myself saying for the 5th time, and this is a good Z clause. I never say that. It's always, this is terrible, I can't believe who signed up to this. So whilst I'm not saying HS2 is perfect by any means, for a heavily amended contract, it's about as pure as you can get. And there's actually 5, and one of them will feature this afternoon. There's some very positive Z clauses that have been added in that actually I think we should want for the future. To be fair, some of them are NEC 4 clauses, that because obviously it was engaged under NEC 3, HS2 have at least taken the step to bring in a couple of NEC 4 mechanisms rather than just leave them as NEC 3. So that's a positive step. And there's a couple of extra things they've done, which is nice initiatives. So credit there for HS2. Any other questions in the middle? It's Rob at the front. Yeah, take the one at the back first, and then Rob at the front, Chris.
Thank you. Hello. Hi, Andrew. Yeah, it's Tom at Think Project. It's clear that collaborative NEC contracting is a key success criteria for the project. So I just wondered what the top 3 things that contribute to that success.
So I missed I couldn't quite hear. What did you say the first part of the sentence?
So collaborative contracting through NEC is obviously one of the key success criteria. So I wonder what the top things that contribute to that.
Yeah. So I think there's, I guess there's hard and soft elements to that. That's probably what I'd say. So some of our contracts force collaboration in the way they're set up. So we're looking at an alliance which fits above the rail systems, for instance, and that's very much set up for that partnering and discussion, both from commercial perspective and from a behavioural perspective. We also look at behavioural assessments more generally in our selection of tier ones. So we look at how tier ones will behave with us as well as their supply chain. So that is assessed as part of a tender. And then finally, we put in, I guess the slightly softer elements, which are in the contract themselves, around how we expect them to live to the HS2 values, which includes collaboration and our values more generally. And they are then pushed into, as roll down into the supply chain as part of their clauses and contracts. So there's probably three things we look at.
I wonder what you're going to say when after the words forced collaboration. That was going to be interesting. Bob, you might have something to say on that behaviourally.
I do like some forced collaboration.
Dean at the front.
Good morning. I picked up earlier, you said there was a reluctance to have Z clauses. I wonder if you could elaborate on it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe you can help me and maybe prove me wrong, but I think the supply chain more generally likes a very standard form of NEC. It makes tendering easier. If you have a very highly amended NEC form contract, it just means that the lawyers get involved more, and actually those costs go up for tendering, and actually it becomes harder to assess risk because there's so many Z clauses. So I guess my comment really was around how do you get to a point where everything you put out is standard as possible so that it makes it easier to understand and comprehend. And that also means for the number of tenders that we're doing, how do you get that consistency of all the tenders that we're doing? So rather than say, on this contract we're going to take this form and these Z clauses, we don't have then a completely new suite of Z clauses every time we come out to market. It looks the same. So that was really my comment about consistency and suitability.
Good answer.
Rob at the front. Time for one more question.
I think most of your tier one delivery teams are JVs. Most of those JVs are cross-jurisdictional, a lot of English plus a European. How have you found dealing with the cultural differences between the way Europeans deliver under primarily FIDIC type contracts as opposed to how they're managed under NEC, and has that worked?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess both from a contractual perspective and from a behavioural and cultural perspective. And you're absolutely right. There are differences in these companies, which are JVs, which are formed from European companies and UK companies. And what I would say is that on the differences, that's the thing that drives the benefit. So because you've got a way of delivering in France and Germany, which is very different from the way of delivering in the UK in construction projects, actually having those different points of view around the table helps with getting the very best, because actually in Europe they've done a lot more high-speed rail than we ever have. So I think actually I would say that it breeds better initiatives, more innovation. With regards to the contracts, I think that's where the British contractors come involved, because they sort of say, well, this is how the contract works. So actually, we recognise you work in FIDIC in Europe, but actually this is how it will work in practice. So we've got the best of both worlds. We've got working in NEC form contract, but also we've got the innovation from our European parties.
Time for one more question, if there is one. Oh, at the front. Oh, try and squeeze two in.
Sorry. Good morning. Just to touch on the issue around inflation, have you included or do you plan to include clause X1 in any of your contracts?
Well, yes, we have included it. And I think it's about how you enact it.
Okay. And has it worked well?
Well, I think it does depend on the contract. Okay. So it's very dependent on where we've applied it and how we're going to apply it. So yeah, it depends on the contract. It's too difficult question to answer holistically, I'd say.
Okay.
We can talk later.
One more at the front. And then.
Thank you. My project's about contract strategy. So given that you're undertaking a significant procurement exercise this year, and the scheme clearly crosses multiple local authorities across a vast extent, I'm assuming that you've got many sets of approvals required before you can start construction. And given that you're undertaking such a significant procurement exercise this year, do you feel there's any risk that you may not get these approvals in time before construction can start? And how are you quantifying that in your contract and risk?
Wow.
Easy one to finish.
Yeah, easy one to finish, yeah. Thanks for that one. So I think the answer to that question, and I'm going to run it a little bit back to your colleague on your right. So one of the key things about delivery and getting this project started is about access to land. So it's about how you get the access to land. So in our phase 2, where we are starting to construct in phase 2A, and then we'll be starting constructing phase 2B, land access is the thing we're looking at. So the strategy always takes into account the timing of that access, and also in phase 2B, the timing of the approval of royal assent. So you can't effectively take the land and start constructing too much until you get royal assent for these projects. And so the whole strategy is about when you get to royal assent and then what do you do after royal assent. So I think the way to answer that question would be to say, yes, we've taken on lessons learnt from phase 1 about how we access land, what works we might do early, how we get that early access and how we do those early works. And then crucially, what work we can do with design prior to royal assent in phase 2B, but also prior to construction in phase 2A, to enable the contractors to, I guess, get the best out of the project and for us to get a program which works on time. So hopefully that gets you to the answer.
I think it was a difficult question.
It was, yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Andrew, thanks for coming to speak to us today, and please show your appreciation once more for Andrew Cubitt.